Hi, everybody. Thank you. So who's ready to make pickles? Okay, so before we make pickles, I'm actually squeezing in a little surprise. I'm gonna demonstrate how to make pickled onions. Okay, so I'll make it and then everybody has a recipe and you can try it at home, but we're not actually gonna all make it here. So pickled, do you have a question? Oh, okay. Pickled vegetables are like a very Jewish thing. Back in Russia and Poland, there wasn't a lot of food, they would gather the cucumbers and the cabbage and onions, and they would want it to last longer so that it didn't spoil. So they would pickle it, and you would see big barrels of pickled vegetables. And it's like a very Jewish thing. When you meet another Jew, or they'll be like, "Oh, my grandmother used to make pickles," or "My grandmother made pickled cabbage," or it's like a talking piece. And it's really fun to do with your grandkids or your friends. And okay, so we're going to start with the pickled onions. So everyone should have a recipe in front of them. There's so many different ways to make pickled onions. There's so many different recipes out there. The one that I am doing today, you don't have to cook. So you don't have to boil the water or anything. That's why I chose it, because we don't have a kitchen here. They're like kind of ready in like an hour, and they last for like a week in the fridge because they're not cooked. They taste really good with like hamburgers or in salads or anything that you would like to eat onions with. So the first thing you do is you slice the onion. You take a red onion, purple onion, and you slice it. You can slice it in circles or smaller. So if you like it with like hamburgers, then this is like the perfect way to slice it. And you can use a jar or a container. So you'll put the onions in the jar, mason jar or container, and then everyone should have the recipe in front of them. This has vinegar, water, kosher salt, and sugar. And you're going to want to use kosher salt because it doesn't have the iodine and it helps with the pickling and fermenting. So I'm just going to I actually think I forgot the vinegar in the car. So we'll demonstrate, we'll pretend that I made a sample though. So this is how it'll look when it's done. This has vinegar in it, but I will show you the process quickly. So you'll put the onions in your jar, then you're going to put, this is sugar. So you're gonna put a half a teaspoon of sugar. So this is a quarter, so we're gonna do a half a teaspoon. You're gonna do a half a teaspoon of kosher salt. And then you're gonna do a third of the container with vinegar and then 2/3 with water. So it would be like, so we could pretend that this is like the vinegar, and then you'd fill up the rest with water. Then you're just gonna close the container tight, give it a little shake so that the sugar and the salt dissolve. And then you leave it to the side, and it should be ready in like an hour. Like this is how it looks. And if anyone wants to taste it, you could come up and taste it at the end. We can cut it into smaller pieces. So this was made this morning, but it can last like a week in the fridge. So there's the pickled onions. Very, very easy. It sounds scarier than it is. Yeah. Yeah, you can use apple cider, you can use red wine vinegar, you can use rice vinegar. There's like so many recipes out there. There's recipes that you cook the water and the vinegar together and then you pour it on top, and that lasts longer. Whenever you cook the vinegar and the water, it makes it last longer. So, okay, so let's get ready to make pickles. Who's ready? Who knows why a lot of pickles are called kosher pickles? No, the salt, because most of the recipes have kosher salt in it, so they adopted the name and they call them kosher pickles. Are all kosher pickles actually kosher? No. If the ingredients in the pickles are not kosher, then the pickles will not be kosher. So all the spices you use have to have been certified by a rabbi, and they have to be kosher in order to make the pickle kosher. So what we're doing today is we're going to be making our own pickling spice. So like if you go to the store, you might see on the shelves pickling spices that are already made with all the ingredients. A lot of those have like cinnamon in it and other spices. They give the pickles like maybe a little bit of a different flavor, but we're going to be making our own pickling spice. So if you see on the recipe card that everybody should have, do you have it or not yet? Not yet? Okay, so I'm just going to go through the ingredients. Yeah, that's fine. We don't need it yet. But so this recipe has garlic, dill, coriander, peppercorn, bay leaves, water, and kosher salt. Coriander is actually cilantro. It's like if you see in the middle of the table, you'll see the light brown. There's a dark brown, which is pepper. The lighter brown is coriander. It's actually cilantro made into a spice. So all these ingredients together are going to be the pickling spice for these pickles. Okay, so we could start, yeah. What? These are half sour pickles. The reason why a half sour pickles do not have vinegar. These pickles don't have vinegar. That's what makes them kosher for Passover, because vinegar is not kosher for Passover. Half sour pickles means that they just weren't fermented as long as a sour pickle. What? The cucumbers? So you can either use Kirby cucumbers, or you can use, they also sell cucumbers that are actually called pickling cucumbers. Like you'll see in some of the grocery stores, they're called pickling cucumbers. Those are good for pickles. You want them to have a thin skin. So like a lot of the regular cucumbers that you use for your salad, those have a much thicker skin, and those are not as good for pickle making. Persian is good, Kirby is good. Yeah. So Persian, you can use Persian also. Anything with a thinner skin. These are actually pickling cucumbers. So these on the ones in your containers are pickling cucumbers. So they have a really thin skin. Now we're going to keep them whole. We're not going to slice them, but when you make this at home, you can slice them into either spears or slice. Okay, so we're going to start. Everybody should have a container in front of them of pickles, of cucumbers. So everybody can open their container of cucumbers, and we're going to do the rest. We're going to follow the recipe step by step together. So every table should have all the ingredients. As we do it, you could just pass it around to your neighbor. So the first thing we're going to do is put the garlic. You could do 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. The garlic is on your table. It's already peeled. So you can take the garlic and pass it around and put it inside. And we'll wait a minute to make sure that everybody got the garlic passed around to them. A lot of people like their pickles a little bit spicy, or if you want a little bit of a kick, you can add a piece of jalapeno into the container. And that gives it a really nice spicy kick. Okay, after the garlic, we are going to put the coriander. The half a teaspoon of coriander seeds. Okay. I'll go slower. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is the 3 or 4 cubes of garlic. Did everybody get the garlic? Not yet. Okay, so we're waiting. If you're skipping ahead, the coriander is the light brown and the peppercorn is the darker brown. And if your table needs anything else, just raise your hand and somebody will come bring you more ingredients. Okay, so we're just up to the garlic. 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. Yeah, I like doing 4. Sometimes when you take this home, the garlic might change colors. It might turn like a little green or a little blue. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with the garlic. It's just the combination of all the spices and the cucumbers changing the garlic's color. While we wait for everybody to finish with the garlic, I'm going to ask a question. Did you get the garlic this table? Did everybody get garlic? Okay. So while we're waiting for everybody to get the garlic, I'm going to ask a question. What does kosher mean? Do you know what kosher means? Fit. Good. People think kosher means fit for use. Fit for use. A lot of people think kosher means it was blessed by a rabbi. It does not mean that. It just means fit for use. When rabbis actually give kosher certifications on foods, they actually don't make a blessing. There is no blessing that they say. Raise your hand if you still haven't done the garlic. Did everybody at this table do the garlic? The what? Coriander is a half a teaspoon. The little measuring thing is a half a teaspoon. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is half a teaspoon of coriander. Do you have a question? Does everybody see the light brown seed on your table? That's the coriander. So you can put in a half a teaspoon of coriander. The utensil that's in the coriander bowl, that is what you need to put, just one of those. That is a half a teaspoon. Just one of the The next thing we're going to do is the peppercorn. So if you want to start with the peppercorn at the same time, half of your table could do the coriander, the other half could do the peppercorn, and then you can swap. So the coriander is a half a teaspoon, and the peppercorn is a quarter of a teaspoon. Both of those spoons are the right measurement. So we'll do them at the same time. We'll do the coriander and the peppercorn at the same time, and you could just swap with your neighbor. While we're waiting for everybody to finish with the garlic, the peppercorn, and the coriander, I'm going to ask another question. When a kosher food mixed with another kosher, what makes kosher food mixed with another kosher food become not kosher? If you mix milk and meat. So we don't mix milk and meat together. So even if it's kosher milk and kosher meat, if they mix, they become not kosher. How long do we wait in between eating, after we eat meat, in order to be able to eat dairy? 6 hours. After we eat meat, before we eat dairy, it's customary to wait 6 hours. After dairy to meat, it's customary to wait an hour. Some people wait a half hour. The reason why we wait 6 hours in between meat and milk is because that's kind of how long it takes for meat to digest in your body. So you want to make sure it's fully digested. Okay, so everybody should have the garlic, the peppercorn, and the coriander in their containers. The next thing we're gonna do is 2 to 4 bay leaves. So you should see leaves on your table. Those are the bay leaves. Put 2 to 4 bay leaves. So everybody should have the garlic, coriander, peppercorn, and now the bay leaves. So you should have 4 ingredients in your container. Did you get everything at this table? The next thing we're gonna do is fill up the container with water. Wait, sorry, we didn't do the salt. We're going to do 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. If you have salt issues and you can't have so much salt, then you would want to just put 1 teaspoon. It will still taste good, it just won't be as salty. So 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and we are using kosher salt. The reason why we're using kosher salt is because it doesn't have iodine in it and it just is better for pickling. The reason why it's called, does anyone know why kosher salt is called kosher salt? What? So we pour salt after we slaughter the kosher animal, we pour salt on it to help absorb the blood. Kosher salt is bigger pieces of salt and it absorbs the blood better. So it got adopted to being called kosher salt because it's used for koshering meat. Okay, so everybody should have garlic, coriander, peppercorn, salt, and bay leaves in their container. And now we are ready to pour water all the way on top into the container, fill it up to the top so that the cucumbers should be covered in water. There's big jugs of water on your table. If you need help, raise your hand. We're gonna do the dill at the end so that it goes on top of the, it's okay if you already did it, but. In order for a fish to be kosher, who knows what it has to have? How do you know if a fish is kosher? Good, fins and scales. In order for fish to be kosher, it has to have fins and scales. So like salmon would be kosher, tuna's kosher. Right, lobster is not kosher. But they do have fake lobster. They do have fake crab and lobster that is kosher, made out of like white fish. In order for an animal to be kosher, what 2 signs does it have to have? Split hooves and chew its cud, right? Right. So cows are kosher, horses would not be kosher, pigs would not be kosher. Okay, if you poured water into your container and your water is up to the top, I'm going to do it quickly for mine. You're now going to take some dill. You can take a couple sprigs of dill. You're going to put it on top of the container, kind of like raise your hand if you're still waiting for any ingredients or water. Is everybody good? Okay, so if you're ready, you can close your container. You want to close it tight and try to make sure there's no air bubbles when you close it. So like close it but in one spot, and then let out all the air and then close it. So when you make this at home, you would want to use a mason jar. That's best for pickling. So after you close your container tight and make sure there's no air bubbles, you can give it a little shake to just to help dissolve the salt. Just a little shake to help dissolve the salt. So if you didn't close yours yet, when you close it, you just want to make sure that there's no air bubbles as best as you can. So close it tight and let out all the air. And now you have pickles that you can take home and enjoy. You can leave them on the counter for a couple days. It'll take about 3 to 4 days for them to be ready. Once you open them, you want them to go in the fridge and so that they don't spoil. Yeah. Yeah, like 3 days. I would say about 3 days. Yeah. You like them more sour? So you can leave them longer, like a week would be fine. These are, so we've just made half sour pickles, so they don't have vinegar and they're not as sour. These are like Bubby's pickles or Nathan's pickles. That's what this is. When you go to the kosher delis in Manhattan and in the Upper East Side, when they give you a deli sandwich, they give it to you with a half sour pickle and they don't have vinegar in it. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? We can ask the light.
Yeah. What?
Okay, what about the there's it losing my notes. We'll talk about that.
Okay, so you want to make sure that if you notice on the recipe, it says.
It's a very important piece of information for your cucumbers.
If you notice on the recipe, there's a tip and it says use an onion to fill the rest of the jar so that the cucumbers are completely submerged. So sometimes when you make pickles, like the top, you'll notice the top is not completely covered in water. So if you take an onion and put it on top, then the onion won't be completely submerged, but the cucumbers will be, and it'll give it a little bit of a nice onion flavor also. So you just cut a piece of an onion, like put it on top of all the cucumbers so that it's kind of being used as like a weight to hold the cucumbers down. Yes.
Can you pickle in half before the fermenting process or wait until afterwards?
No, you can cut the pickles. So like if we had knives here, anybody that wanted could cut their pickles in half. You could cut them in slices. If you cut them in slices, it'll just ferment a lot faster. Yeah. Also, if you're making it at home, you would want to cut off the ends. Like if you have any of these, you'd want to cut them off so that they're not on the cucumber. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes. Do we what? In the pickles? It would be a different recipe with vinegar because you would want to cook the water, and so this one specifically doesn't have any vinegar. The kosher pickles don't have vinegar. The half sours don't have vinegar. I think that back in Russia and Poland, when they were fermenting things, they didn't have vinegar, so they just used water and salt, and that's how they fermented vegetables. Yes. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so everybody give yourself a round of applause for making your own pickles. And you can take the recipe home and do it again with your friends or family or grandkids. Any last questions?